Joan Andreu Sánchez, who I introduce now. He's an assistant professor at Universitat Polytechnic. I always troubles with the name of the Polytechnico. So Universitat Politecnica de Valencia, if I pronounce it properly. And he's a director of a division with a very long name, which is a Pattern Recognition and Human Language Technologies Research Center. His main research area is machine learning and formal languages applied to text recognition and math recognition. He participated in several European projects and led the Transcriptorium project, probably well known for most of the audience. Okay, so thank you for joining this panel. And the fourth panelist is Thomas Aigner. I think I don't have to introduce him for the archivist, because I think he's very well known in the archivist arena, but some data about his biography. So he's the director of the archives of the Diocese of St. Pölten, Austria, since 1995. He's the president of the Icarus, and he led a lot of EU-funded projects supporting mainly digitization activities. So actually, he's the inventor and engine of the Icarus network, and he's also the subdirector, vice president of the Time Machine organization, if I'm correct with everything. So welcome all of you in this panel. So my first question would be to all of you. So I started this conference with that. My impression is that in the last couple of years, there were so many new technologies or so many new applications of development created, which can be revolutionized our job. And I just want to know whether it's only my impression or these new technologies will really transform our profession. Let's start with Kerstin.
I definitely agree. So there have been quite a few new technologies developed during the last few years and implemented, at least on a project level, in the archives or cultural heritage domain. I think there still is way to go and lots to learn from what we just heard in the morning session from Artem with regard to also the quality of data. So I think all these kind of new technologies, and that includes the one that we talked about this morning, but also includes things like e-discovery, which you could in theory apply through the whole life cycle of the of the records continuum, so to say. Also kind of put us on the spot to review the quality of the data that we already have, and to review how we want to create data in future and make it available in future. I think the point that Artem made about licensing of metadata in the cultural heritage domain is something that is really important, and we already heard about Europeana. So Europeana is always advocating for an as open as possible license. And that's also something that actually Archives Portal Europe is currently in the process of implementing.
Okay, so there are a lot of new implementation area and a lot of activities related. How do you see, Thomas? You also know very well the archives.
I fully agree with Kerstin. I think the archivist of tomorrow won't be able to be compared with the archivist of today, because
sorry, Thomas, a bit louder, because this mask actually blocked the
So I think the archivist of tomorrow won't be able to be compared with the archivist of today, because today the archivist manages documents and records and books and objects, but tomorrow the archivist will only manage simply information. And I think that's the difference. Information independently from time and space. And this will open up fundamentally new tasks for the archivists to accomplish, and this will also fundamentally open up new possibilities and new challenges within the administrations for the archivists. So I think In 50 years, if we talk about an archivist, I'm not sure if the profession still will be called archivist.
What do you call it?
Sorry?
What would you call it then?
I don't know. Maybe information manager or
Historical
whatever.
information managers or managers of historical records.
I think it will be our task to take care of the preservation of information and of the provision of information simply. So in my view, an archival document is nothing more than information. Independently, be it a disk or be it a parchment or be it a book, it's simply information, nothing more and nothing less.
Joan Andreu, you are coming from the other side of this cooperation. How do you see the future of the archivists? You work in a lot of different projects together with manuscript collections and institutions held them. So how do you see how we will transform?
Okay, is this working? Okay, so I agree with Thomas that in the future archivists have to be able to deal with a different way of dealing with the information. So currently they have in their hands something that is material, that in the future they will have something that could be not a material thing. So the amount of information is increasing, and I think that in the future more and more information will be available for the archivists, and they have to be familiar with the technology, with the vocabulary, things like ground truth that until some years ago was unknown for people from archives. Now they have to learn the vocabulary, the techniques, the technology, the possibilities, because this is opening new markets for the future. Not it's important to say this because sometimes archivists are aware of their jobs, but this is not the point. So in the future, I think that they will have more new tools and new techniques for dealing with the information that they are preserving.
Okay, thank you. And Artem, what do you think what we witness now is an evolutionary leap, or it's just we normal people with background of humanities see that way?
Actually, I wouldn't be so optimistic, to be honest. Yeah, maybe it's my personal experience working with GLAM institution and archives especially, but taking into account my experience of artificial intelligence community, I understood that the cultural heritage domain and archives in general, archives especially, they are like 5 or maybe 10 steps below of the applying artificial intelligence techniques and approaches than other domains. For example, like there are a lot of approaches which already can be applied without human in medical domain. There are different techniques and approach. We can predict, analyze data in the computer vision, in natural language processing, and all of this stuff. But taking into account the limitations of the cultural heritage domain and archives, especially because it's pretty like monolith area, applying these techniques is going really slow. And as I told before, we have to understand that some of the limitations can be resolved by us who works in this area, and it should be the key point, the start point of the applying artificial intelligence and changing this area, these fields in the future. Basically, I'm super sure that everything changed in a couple of years, maybe like 10 or 12 or 15 years. But to be able to apply this, to start this process of changing, we have to understand the problems, the challenges which we have right now, and it's a key point. As I told before, like it can be the problem of data limitation, the accessibility of the data, the applying of the data for like training and different approaches of machine learning, artificial intelligence in general. But yeah, that before talking about like applying these techniques to archives, we have to understand the challenges and to solve it before, and after that we can start the transformation. I'm pretty sure that it's necessary. In the future, we will be able to, we will live in information area, and as I told my colleagues, I mean, they are right about the transformation of profession of archivist, but I'm not sure that it can be done in a couple of years or maybe 5 years, because there are like limitations which we have right now.
What is missing the most? Okay, I think our profession or cultural heritage people were always reacted very slowly to technologies, so they were very late adapters. So what do you think, which are the main factors which remains? Money, knowledge, organizations?
It's pretty difficult to answer, because I guess it's a more complex problem. First of all, we have to understand that the commercial area and research area, they are completely different because of the amount of money. And for example, like if we would work in a Google where we have the unlimited amount of the resources, definitely we would like increase or speed up the process of transformation. But at the same time, we have the limited amount of money here for researchers for applying the different state-of-the-art techniques to the cultural heritage. A part of it, we have the limitation of the structure. So basically, like the commercial area, it's kind of the area where we collect the data in a unique format, or we have the data in a unique format. For example, like as a Google, Facebook, or Apple, they collect the data, they use the data, they transform the area, and they apply these approaches to the users. In cultural heritage, we have like pieces of the data in different organizations, and they are like stored in different formats. They have different metadata. They are unstructured. They are like they have poor metadata, and such kind of the problems can be the challenge or the stop point for the transforming of cultural heritage domain and applying the artificial intelligence in cultural heritage domain. Because first of all, we have to solve these problems. And after that, we can understand, okay, right now we have the data, we have access to the data is available for everyone, and after that we can start the process of transforming.
Okay, this is the segmentation of this data is why we are working on the aggregators, why we try to push the archive sport Europe and giving this cooperation a bigger role.
Yeah, I mean, maybe picking up on some of the things that Artem just said, I think so the data is one problem, and we'll have to solve this one way or the other. But I also think it's an organizational challenge and an intellectual challenge, because all these conversations that we have had during the last, let's say, 5 years about digital transformation always seem to operate on the assumption that we do this now and then we are done. So we go there and we reach a certain point and then we are done. And that's not the case, because we know technology is evolving, and it's evolving fast, and it will continue to evolve. So we actually need to rethink the way how we work, how we cooperate, how we create the information that we hold, how we manage the information that we hold in a more flexible way, so that we can adapt more easily to the technology moving forward, and do that in a continuous process, and not something that we do now and then we are finished at some point. I think that's what I find is the biggest challenge when you have conversations like this.
Thomas, I see that you made notices. Probably you want to comment it.
Yes, of course. I fully agree with you, what you said.
Loudly, please.
I think, but in general, I think it's just a matter of time that the cultural heritage domain applies all the technologies that are already available. So if we think what our smartphones can already do, so I think it's no surprise that also cultural heritage data can be used with all those technologies. And if we consider that, I don't really want to know what the various military engineers already have developed, what they are able to do with data. And I think in a couple of years, also we in the cultural heritage field will be able to apply such technologies. So I think it's just a matter of time. Of course, we have to recognize the challenges and take them on. But I think the more the technology advances, the more also the cultural heritage sector will fall into applying such technologies. And another aspect, I think it's also important to say, it's been talked about weakness of metadata, of data and poor data, and so I think we have to consider that there will be always different speeds within the various institutions, be it a small municipal archive, or be it a huge national archive, or be it a huge museum like the Prado in Madrid. I think the ones will have excellent data and that can be applied for various types of technologies, and the others will simply have Excel sheets. But I think what will actually happen will that the solutions in order to apply technology will become simpler and simpler. And I think what we really will need in the future is also technology out of the box, so that the small municipal archive or the small parish archives can simply download the software and use it in a very simple way without having technological skills. And I think the more the technological development proceeds, the more such solutions will be available and will bring us to the huge big data of the past.
Okay, actually, for some things we have products out of the products box, out of the box products now. For example, the HDR, we have the Transcribus software. So probably this will be the future for all similar applications of that. So even small university archives can use it. Or what are your experience with that? So this Transcribus is a good model, or there is something beyond that what we cannot prepare for? Joan Andreu?
I would like to
comment. That's okay. Please do it.
On previous things that were mentioned by Kerstin and also by Thomas, that we are many times speaking about technology, but there are still many aspects, fundamental aspects to be researched, because archives and the clients at the end, what they expect is to have out-of-the-shelf tools for performing some of the tasks. But I think that we are not still in this point, because most of the collections, at least from the HTR point of view, handwriting recognition point of view, the collection used to be quite different each from other, at least currently. And the amount of data for processing the data is different from one collection to another collection. So effectively, the technology is advancing quite fast, but we should be step by step, in the sense that there are many things to do, many things to research, many things to see if this is the correct way or not. So little by little,
Just I wanted to point out whether you said that HTR or handwritten text recognition is not reached that point to support the archives with out-of-the-shelf tools and needs continuous research. And do we have ever a point to reach when we have a tool which can read everything? My experience is that actually all the archival collections are different in some way. So, and we try to adapt a methodology either with technologies or just processing the data, providing, extracting metadata, and so on. We had to customize all the solutions always. So I think, and that was probably I don't know, Thomas, please respond it, probably a problem for the time machine organizations, that the big data of the past is actually a big mess, not easy to standardize back in the future the documents which in the 19th or earlier centuries never even think about standards. So is there a chance that we have out-of-the-box tools to process this data?
We simply have to be aware of the fact that we are still in the digital stone age. We are still at the beginning of an evolvement. So, of course, it's exciting what your tablet is able to do, and it's exciting what transcribers can do partly, but it's a very young evolvement, and we are still at the beginning. So we have to see it on the long run. So I think. If we think about a time of in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, everything will have fundamentally changed. So if we consider what has happened in the last 20 years. And so I think to talk about the big data of the past or to talk about a handwritten text recognition that works properly is something that simply needs time. It needs time and money, and taking into account that for military developments of weapons and all that stuff, there are trillions of euros and dollars per year to push that development forward. We need to consider that in our field we only have millions and maybe billions one day. And so the development goes much slower than in other fields. But I'm deeply convinced of the fact that it's just a matter of time. Let's say it in this way, okay, a weapon that is able to read HDR properly 100% can be developed with the military budgets within the next 2 or 3 years. But we don't have the money, so for us it will take 20 or 30 years in order to develop it properly so that it really can be applied in a fully automated way within the archives.
Kerstin?
Maybe picking up on this question of out-of-the-box tools or adaptable tools, I think that's probably also one of the tricky questions, because on the one hand, you probably would want to get to the point where we have tools that are as easy to use as our mobile phones, because everyone is used to swiping there, clicking on that icon, and then something happens, and we don't really think about what it actually is that happens in the background. But on the other hand, as you said, we also need to kind of consider specific situations that will always differ between different types of institutions, between different scenarios. So if we are talking about a big institution with hundreds of employees, or are we talking about a one-man, one-woman archive where this one person has to do everything? We're also kind of getting back to the data situation. We are still nowadays dealing with institutions that even don't have kind of the simplest of collection management system. But which would kind of enable them to at least kind of do an XML export and then be part of something like Archives Portal Europe. So we also need to think about how can we kind of pick up everyone at the stage where they are at the moment. I mean, it's nice to have all these nice and shiny tools, But if you are working with CSV spreadsheets, then this tool is so far away for you that you will never consider using it. So I think that's also this thing we need to have in mind, that even if the tools are available, that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is in a position to use them and to contribute to their development. And I think that's also something that we as a community need to think about. How can we enable this? How can we enable smaller institutions to be part of this conversation? Because they usually also have quite interesting collections that would probably kind of help develop these tools further in ways that we can't imagine right now, but they never or very rarely get to the point that they are part of the conversation, that they're part of the table discussion. So I think that's also something that we need to think about, and maybe something like Icarus as a network or Archives Portal Europe as an aggregator and the network around it are organizations that could play a role in this. So kind of trying to get these small institutions in the circle, so to say.
Yes, but how? That would be my question, because, okay, Thomas, maybe you answer it.
Thank you, Kerstin. I think this is really a crucial point, and I think I also fully agree that we as a community also have to take care of those who have not the access to that proper technology. It's also a matter of solidarity or something like that. But I think there is a lot happening in that field already, and one best practice example in my view is, for instance, the Lower Austrian museums management. In Lower Austria you have about 700 museums. You have the small village museum with just one curator there, and you have the huge provincial museum with 100 collaborators there. So you have quite a wide range of types, and they have established an online system in order to process and to process the data in the various museums. And from the smallest to the largest museum, all museums in Lower Austria can work in that system, and they made it already to bring most of those museums to process their data within that system. So the very small village museum, they work already in that system, and the standardized data is created, and everything is in an online environment, and is, if they want to, also published. And so I think there could be many other examples be added to that.
Okay, Kerstin, then.
Maybe just as an additional idea in terms of how can we get to this point that we can include these smaller institutions or institutions that are less often heard about in these conversations. I mean, we are currently across the continent, across the world, experience this the situation that, at least in the kind of industrialized world, vaccination has reached a certain point, and then it seems to level out. And there are various kind of initiatives there at the moment where actually vaccination is brought to the people. And I think that might actually be a model that we should think about. So really bringing these tools to the people. And I mean, offering an online service that everyone can access is one way, but I think there also is the question of, can we actually kind of go there, sit down with them, talk about how they do things and how we can help them in kind of improving the way they do things. And doing that in kind of a regional event or something like this, where actually we go there and really just sit down and talk. I mean, that's one of the things that in the beginnings of Archives Portal Europe I found as being the most effective, when we had the possibility to go to the participating institutions and actually just simply talk with them about how they do things, get an understanding of how they do things, and then think together how we can kind of bring this in a mapping situation, so to say.
So organization and big institutions should actively approach these small institutions in order to get information from them. What are their needs and how can we help their needs? So, and this leads to the other topic other issue I wanted to raise, that how it can, what is the optics of this from the developer side? So whether the archives, museums, libraries could able to formulate their needs at all to the developers. So how do you see that? First, who will be the first to answer? Joan Andreu.
At least from the point of view of developers, we need to listen to the organizations in order to see and to understand the problems they are faced to. Okay, so at the beginning, I remember some time ago, maybe 15 years ago, Enrique and me, and I went to a company in order to disseminate the HDR technology. And that company told us, okay, this is nice. Who is buying this? And then we went to the archive thinking that there were a lot of people transcribing the manuscripts. We are completely wrong. And we saw the HDR development, and they thought, okay, this is nice. Who is selling this? Okay, so we needed to approach to the archives in order to see where in order to know the problems they have. Okay, so I think that now, at least after 15 years, we are in a good position for knowing at least some of the problems.
Okay, and this is what related to this, and 1 minute, and I give you the floor. That in our case, what in this sub-project, what we work together in this EDT, we first tried to use the Transcribus software, but our experience was that our archivist couldn't handle it, couldn't handle the problems what raised during this whole process, and we didn't get answers because this collection was a unique one, and we needed specific answers from the experts who worked that. So an out-of-the-box software wasn't enough for us. So a two-way communication needed, I think, for you to understand our needs and for us to be helped with this. So Artem, what was your experience in this paintings?
I just wanted to say, to support your point of view, because it's not like a one-sided process. So when we are going to archives, asking them what they need, and we, as a developers, do something and suggest some kind of like software. I guess it's a both-side process. So first of all, we have to understand the needs, but at the same time, we have to suggest something. The archives community is not from technological world. I mean, deep technological world, and sometimes they are not aware about the possibilities and advantages of the technology which we can suggest right now. And I guess it's a both-side process, because we have to show what we can suggest, and we have to find the points of communication between needs and possibilities. And that's why we have to communicate with them a lot, just to be able to start the process of transformation, or process of suggesting something from the developer side. And because I mean, we had the such kind of like weird experience of use cases when we, as developers, we saw that, yeah, this technology is really nice, we would like to apply it, we would like to suggest it, but it was useless basically. And we spent like half of the year just to be able to develop some kind of approaches, suggest them to the community, and they said, it's not interesting for us. But at the same time, we had the cases when we when we saw that something is not important, or it's kind of like super easy to solve, but for the archives community it was like super difficult, super important, and we have to like they wanted it a lot. Actually, the idea, not the idea, I guess the solution of this problem, of this situation, is to make the platform or the communication community just to be able to collect the needs and to show the advantages of the technologies and applying these technologies in the archives, especially from the developer's point of view.
It also a related problem that I think a lot of European money is burned for these researches, and the outcomes are very rarely implemented in practical environment. So there must be some gap between the research and the actual users, what we have to deal with. So, and what do you think, what would be the good strategy for the archives to fill these gaps? So should we hire machine learning engineers in our archives, or should we train our staff to train them with computational thinking? What, or hire more company, make permanent cooperations with small companies? What would be the best solution to close this gap?
I think that at least one of the things that should be performed in the future is at least to promote, to move people and researchers that are familiar with information technology to the archives, in order at least to reduce this gap. Okay, because more and more technology information systems are there, and people that is familiar with that can be familiar with this kind of tools should be included in the staff of the archives in order to decrease this gap. I think one of course, is just a question of money. Money and time, sure.
Everybody agrees? Kerstin?
In general, I agree, because at the moment, most of the times in the archives, you don't have the expertise. So you will have to look at opportunities to get this expertise into your organization, and that can either be by consultation, by cooperation projects, or by hiring someone who does it. The difficulty that I have with this from personal experience is that this also kind of creates the impression in your organization that there is someone who's dealing with all of this, so I don't have to engage with it. And I think that's the point that we want to avoid, because ideally we would want the whole organization to be part of this digital transformation that we're all talking about. So if you take kind of external expertise in, you always have to think about, okay, how can we use this external expertise not only to develop something and to bring us further in a specific project, but also to build capacity within our organization so that we can take these projects on step by step ourselves. So I think it's kind of a two-sided sword, so to say, with external expertise being a necessity at the moment, but also something that we need to integrate in the process.
Okay. Thomas?
I think the point you are speaking about, it's crucial, because we have to consider that applying technology in the archival work is also a matter of a proper mindset within the archive, of a culture of working, of openness for new things. And it's also a matter of commitment to technology and to technological progress in the archival work. And if I now consider, let's say, the 30 national archives in Europe, I think the minority of those is really keen on advancing technology for their archives. But not because they are not interested in, because they have so much to do. They have so much other stuff to do, and so they simply do not have time to deal with that. They have to struggle with their everyday work. And so I think one possibility to fill the gap or to overcome that could be that we start to rethink a little bit the concept of archival data, and to realize it more as to see it a little bit more in general, as I already said, as simple information of history or of culture, and to unite with similar sectors like museums or like archaeologists or other institutions that are keen on applying technology, and to create an alliance in order to drive the development forward, as we do it in the Time Machine organization. That's the purpose of the Time Machine organization, simply to find such partners that are really keen on driving the development forward, and to do it across the sectors, and not to make a distinction between an archival data, museum data, or other data. So we simply have the same goal, and I think it's also an experience of 20 years Icarus. I think it's important to have some let's say flagship institutions that drive the development forward, and I think they should not be prevented from doing that. And I think that's the only way, I guess, to create strong dynamics, and not to wait for the slower ones. The slower ones, they will come one time.
Okay, I try to simplify it for myself, and summarize it in some ways. That first of all, we have to be patient, because we cannot and not able to rush as like for military, and we also have to start cooperate actively with the developers, supporting their work, being open for the small archives, supporting them. And as big institutions, we have to play a flagship role or something like that. I hope that I didn't miss too much from this simplification. So before I would like to give the floor for the audience for questions to ask directly from our experts, I would like to challenge with last question from me. That it's very obvious that handwritten text recognition will revolutionize the archives. So we have a lot of original materials, a lot of text, and we would like to give a direct access for the users to that text, and not only to read it, but to process it, to link it to each other, and have extra information from that. The same with the visual object detection. So we have large photo collections, not accessible directly with the content. So I think these two topics will absolutely revolutionize or transform the way how we work. But based on your experience, is there any other big things what we have to rely on? So is there any big thing what there is an ongoing research, avoid or attention? So when we will do, for example, as my colleague asked, made finding aids automatically without the help of the archivist. So what you think, is there any other big thing?
Okay, so I think that the archives also preserves other kind of material that could be, that I think that is quite interesting. But I'm not sure if they, okay, let me explain. For example, speech records or radio records from the past.
Yes, we have voice records too. For example, protocols of in our case in the Hungarian National Archives, or records of the Communist Party meetings. So yes, a lot of we have audiovisual archives too. Yeah. Yes.
And I think that there are also a kind of there is also a kind of material that is quite interesting, that are maps.
Yeah.
Maps or
maps. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, geographical data. We will learn tomorrow from Gregor about how to preserve the data.
But any kind of maps from I don't know, maybe cities, planes of cities, or buildings, or coastal maps, things like that. I think that this is quite interesting, and there is not much research on this. I think that this is quite interesting.
For example, for treasure hunters?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kerstin? Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Continue.
This is quite interesting because the coast is changing along the time. So some information that was valid in the past is not valid anymore because the coast is changing. So the position of some wrecks now are not correctly marked in the maps.
Ah, yes. Okay, so other fields which is I didn't think about but cancelled by these new technologies. Kerstin first?
I mean, I think there are different different answers to this question. One is picking up on something that Thomas said earlier, that we are still kind of at the very beginning of all of this. So even things that have been around for quite some time, like linked open data, I think is still something that is relatively new for the archival domain. There also are things like, for example, blockchain, when it comes to born digital information and making sure that we can prove their authenticity independent from whatever happens to them, from being created to being preserved at the archival institution to being used and reused by end users. And then there also is this thing that Artem told about earlier in his presentation, the bias that comes with all of these machine learning and artificial intelligence, and that I don't think we really have a handle on yet. So, I mean, he was talking about kind of men being recognized better than women, or a white face being recognized better than a brown or black face. And I think these are still things that we need to find a way to address and a way to work with before we really can fully implement those technologies. So there's still a lot to learn and experience and experiment on, I think.
The answer for this question is not so easy because first of all we have to understand the needs of the archives just to be able to suggest something, because right now the technologies can give like almost everything from like speech recognition, caption generation, image captioning. For example, like it was really funny and really interesting technology which implemented the National Archives of Estonia. They launched the website where you can upload your pictures, and based on the similarity, the algorithm tried to find your relatives in archives of the photos of the National Archive of Estonia. So it's not the question of the technology. I mean, the technology is like really interesting and really nice to implement. Not just to implement, to experiment, to try it, and do all of this stuff. But we have to understand: do we need it, or it's just for play, for today and for tomorrow? So basically, if you are talking about the big archives with a lot of objects where we can find the images, the video films, the speech, the radio examples, and all of this stuff, we can apply everything. Like for example, we can apply the subtitle generation. We can apply the idea of like speech recognition or image captioning, or comparison the similarity, the topic modeling, the extraction of the main idea of the text, the hand text recognition, all of this stuff. But if you are talking about like small archives, we have to understand the needs of these archives just to be able to suggest something. Yeah, I mean, it's not the matter of technology; it's a matter of the needs. What I think.
Or the matter of the vision. So Time Machine organization had a wonderful vision about how to extract, connect, and display the big data of the past. So Thomas, this vision still valid, or what is the way to reach it?
I think it's not a vision, it's something that will happen. It's just a matter of time. I can't say when it will happen, if it will happen in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Because, as I said, we have to consider we are at the beginning of a digital age. So in 100 years or 200 years, I think nobody of us can imagine how our life will be. Ours not, but of our children and children's children. So I think it will happen. But talking about other technologies that might be interesting for that is, I think the total field of image capturing also needs to be accelerated with with the new technologies in order to accelerate the scan process, for instance. So, for instance, there are promising projects dealing with X-ray scanning, so that you do not need to open the book anymore. And I think if that really works one day, it would help us very, very much. And the same applies for scanning of 3D objects. At the moment, it's really expensive and very time-consuming, but I think one day, don't know when, there will be much more affordable devices in order also to do the 3D scanning in a small museum. So we talked about the small institutions. To a fully digitization of objects in a small museum at the moment, it's simply a vision because it's too cost effective. But I think there will be the devices in 10 or 15 years or maybe earlier that will make it affordable for them. And I think another thing that also makes me very happy as a culturally and historically interested person is that the way of how we visualize historical information will also radically change. I think there's nothing more user hostile than an archive tectonics. Sorry to say that in that group, but I think for us as archivists, it's wonderful to have a structure and to have a tectonic and a system. But for somebody who is not an historian and who is not an archivist and not an historian, it's simply terrible to find something in there. So I think we need also to think about ways to visualize our information in a much more user-friendly way. And I think there are going on a lot of very promising projects. So I think of the Charges project here in Barcelona that tries to automatically extract data and create network diagrams, create Facebook pages of historical persons out of civil registers and so. And I think also the possibility of display historical data, GIS based on a map or on timelines or whatever. I think the fantasy has no limits in that field. I think this needs also to be considered that this is really important that we think of that the search result in the future must not be a simple list or some structure. It must be something, or not it must be, it will be something much more fancy, and that's what I'm looking forward.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to give the floor now to the audience to ask questions from our experts. So Leonard first.
Thank you very much. I must say that I am very heartened by what I have heard today and your discussion. However, I would like to ask for your views. For example, Thomas mentioned solidarity. Artem said in Estonia they are doing this project that so far, while other archives are still struggling to digitize their material. Do you think that the archival world, I'm speaking now from a management governance point of view, political, I would say, rather than technological, require a change or a development, I would say, of mindset For example, is it wise to start considering cultural heritage or archival heritage as common heritage rather than structured along geographical political lines? I come from National Archives of Malta, very small. We're still struggling. Joan Andreu knows with some things and so on. That because otherwise, all these nice words that one day will happen, as Thomas has said, and that somehow puts together that this is a common heritage. But how to do it? How will we, is it reasonable to start thinking along these lines? For example, time machine is moving, trying to collect and these things. But because otherwise, I'm afraid that much of the developments are being approached from a bottom line point of view, trying to get money by making the information that we have as an asset that can be traded, that can make one can make profit, films, media, and so on. But I think it's more than that. I don't think that archives can flourish as an on the stock market. There is not that, like education, health, at least in the European world, all hospitals are run at a deficit. If they were, or I mean public hospitals, I mean. So do we need to consider the governance of archives a development that is parallel with the technological advancement? Thank you.
Thomas.
I just want to answer the one point. Maybe the others can be answered by my colleagues. But should we think cultural heritage as a common cultural heritage? So as I would say a clear yes, because you cannot divide the information that is contained in a document from the related information that is contained in a museum's object or in a building that is related to that document. I think it's all linked.
But and beyond national boundaries as well.
Yeah, without national boundaries, of course, without any boundaries and without any limits, because any information you have in a document is linked with another information, be it a museum's object or a museum, or be it in Malta, or be it in Austria, or be it in Finland. So we have to think it totally without any restrictions and borders. And I think there is a huge chance for us as archives, because now we simply have just one paper with some part of the information. And if we can make it to link that information to the respective building or object, and the information in our document becomes much more value than it has now, because now it's isolated and the context is not there and nobody understands the document. And I think that's one of the things that inspires me so much in the digital age, to create and open up totally new worlds whenever it will happen. But I think it's already going on in parts of our world.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. So I think in answer to Leonard's question, there are different things that we're talking about today that link into this. So the first one is kind of considering all the data that we have as data or as information, not making any difference whether that is archival information or museum information or library information or archaeological information. The second thing is making this information available openly under an open license, so that we can also tap into kind of projects from other domains that just can use our data, make something with it, and then we can kind of rerun that in our own domain, or kind of learn from what someone else did with our data and what that means for our data. And the third thing that I want to say is probably also kind of, again, a metadata aspect, but with regard to standardization. So trying to move away from kind of the very strict concepts that we currently have to something that is more flexible, so going into an entity relation model, so talking more about entities and classes rather than kind of putting things into fixed boxes, which we then have to realign between the different areas of cultural domain. So kind of really being more flexible in how we see things, how we work with things, how we give access to things.
Thank you. I would like to bring a new perspective comparing cultural heritage, because, okay, after the presentation of Artem, it is obvious that if you are watching a painting and a sculpture, public can see directly if it is a virgin, I don't know if it is the three graces, because you have this direct understanding of reality. In the case of archives, I think it is more difficult and tricky. And this is our traditional problem, because we can't connect our materials with society, because we need these traditional skills of paleography, for example, and this is also related with handwriting text recognition. For example, we are experiencing, and we are going to see this afternoon, how we can train the system to index words in our text directly in the images. But normally these texts are writing in all Spanish, English. Maybe people of today, 2021, is not able to read or to understand the content of this information. The same with the different types of handwriting. So it is like we still need these traditional skills that we archivists have. Because, and this is, I think, our problem comparing with other cultural institutions, that at the end, for the most part of our documents, at least in Spain, until from 18th century until now, okay, we are able more or less to read the text, but not before. So if we put all this information, for example, online, with these new technologies, finally people are still have these barriers, because they are not able, people now, 21 years, are not able to read these other types of handwriting. And okay, this is only a reflection, and I think in we archives we have these difficulties still.
So how to make consumable the information that we have for the users, for according to real needs, and it includes, of course, multilinguality and different cultures. How can we interpret the text in different cultural backgrounds differently? So there is a lot of challenges which is related to humanities. Oh, you have your one.
I hope it's still working. So, so I don't want to say that we don't need these expertise that are in the archives world and that are also in other cultural heritage branches. On the other hand, I mean, Artem told us his experience of the National Gallery, where he stood in front of a painting and saw what is on the painting, but he was lacking the context. So I think that is one example where actually it's the same in an art context as it would be in an archival context. So I think the question is, how can we make this expert knowledge available to the user and make it available to the user in a sense that they can use it in their own context, so that they, I think there's also this point where a lot of archival colleagues will have to let go of the idea that they are the only one understanding this. So I think we'll have to think about, okay, yes, we have this expert knowledge, but we need to part with this expert knowledge to make it available along with the objects that we maintain and that we hold to the user for them to make sense of it.
Can I? Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of transformation of expertise of the person to the expertise of the technology. Because I'm not sure if it was in Israel, they had the same problem. They had the same problem of transforming the text into the understandable text on the natural language, because there are different types of the language, and they are not looks like each other. But they made a lot of work of translating these types of documents manually. And after that, they were able to implement the technology which were able to handle this problem. So it's not about like losing the skills or getting avoid of the skills. It's just a way of transforming the skills from one form to another one. That's all.
We have questions from the internet.
Thank you. So it is rather a statement than a question, referring to Christina. And Antonio writes, talking about archival perception, I agree with Christina Diaz, although maybe could we consider the connection between textual metadata and related images of other visual works? So maybe somebody wants to go on that.
So, anybody want to react? And it reminded to my question to what I didn't ask. So how will we change the balance between creating metadata and relying on the object data, the data contained in the object? So the future will be easier for us, for archivists, not to create so much metadata. But what was exactly the question?
Talking about archival perception, I agree with Christina Diaz, although maybe could we consider the connection between textual metadata and related images of other visual works?
Okay, so actually the comment wanted to point out the connection between these two things, and what we discussed before, that how the images or audiovisual data and the description are important for the interpretation. So that is what I understand from this comment, much more a comment than a question. So, but if you want, then react to my question. So it will be easier for us not to create so much metadata. And we talked about this probably misleading metadata, but actually the machine processing cannot use well or cannot, so it actually misleads the algorithms.
Maybe starting with the question of making relations, I think that brings us back to defining the entities, defining the classes that we want to talk about, because those should be there independent of whether we talk about the textual metadata that we already have, or if we talk about text that has been extracted from a digitized object, or if we are talking about information that is held in a born digital archival object. All of these will have some overlaps in terms of entities and classes that they represent. And I think these would allow us to make links between all of these different types of information objects that we handle. In terms of whether or not all of this gets easier, I think it gets different. So what Artem said earlier, I think we need to rethink how we apply the knowledge that we have, or how we enable others to apply their knowledge, rather than kind of having all of that structured beforehand. We are probably kind of doing this retrospectively. So there might be machine processing, there might be something that has been created completely automatically, but there still will need to be some human interaction to make sense of it. I mean, the machine might have kind of anchor points where it can make sense of it, but we, in our context with culture or heritage, always talk about culture, and culture is something that is experienced in the community of humans. So there always is this human aspect to it. And whether we apply that beforehand or afterwards doesn't necessarily make a difference in terms of we have to apply it at some point.
Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, I really hope that we have to work less on manual metadata in the future. So any further questions? No. So actually, before I give you the floor for final comment, if you want to add anything to this panel discussion before we close it. So I would like to say a big thanks for everybody who followed it online or here. Thank you for participation. So what would be the final word for the audience?
At least from a researcher point of view, I think that for the future, so we will need more data for training the models that we are trying to develop. So this happened in the past with speech recognition. So as the amount of data was increasing, the speech recognizer were improving, and I think that it will happen similar to in this area. So create data, good data, and I think that in the future we will get nicely surprises.
Okay.
Okay. I think I'm going to pick up on the collaboration aspect that kind of came up in various comments, and I will just want to say, don't be afraid reaching out, don't be afraid asking questions. I know it's a platitude, but there are no dumb questions. Just ask them if you have them. We might be on different stages on this travel, but we are all in this travel together.
Artem?
Yeah, I guess I will repeat the point of my colleague. We need the data. We need the data to speed up the process of applying technologies in archives and in the GLAM institutions. But at the same time, coming back to your question of about the metadata and all of this stuff, I had a feeling that maybe we have to start the discussion about standards or process of standardization of metadata in the cultural heritage. In some way, I don't know what kind of the form, what kind of the standards should be applied, but if you would like to use the technologies in the GLAM, in the cultural heritage domain, we have to understand that the metadata should be standardized and accessible for everyone.
Thomas?
Yeah, firstly, I wanted to suggest maybe there is some part in the project, budget to establish a regular TV show with a talk show, because I think with Zoltan we have the perfect talk master. So I think you should keep doing that within the project. But I think our current situation in the archives is you can see the digital era as full of threats, but you can also see it as full of challenges and opportunities to transform the archival caterpillar into the most beautiful butterfly ever. And I think never before in history it's been so exciting to be an archivist.
Thank you everybody for these inspiring thoughts, and to be honest, if you let me some personal remarks to at the end. So I surprised surprised for such an agreement among you on the different topics. I followed when Kerstin from a very different area talked something that all of the other experts just were nodding. So it was a kind of harmony between the people who came from very different background, development archives or any other things. So actually the message for me, the message was that so the aim of this panel was to, and the whole project was to bring together and bring closer these experts from the different areas. And what Kerstin said before, that we archivists should ask the questions. Of course, we are so far from that knowledge, what the developers, engineers, machine learning experts have, that we have to ask. We have to ask their help in order to formulate the problem, to ask a proper question, and also have to react somehow, develop somehow the model, how at institutional level we participate in this development of the future, and have to be patient too. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for those who following online the event, and we will continue, but after lunch break. So we will have a lunch break now, 1.5 hour long, and we will continue with the next section exactly 2 o'clock, exactly at 2 o'clock. So welcome back. Thank you again for the panelists, Joan Andreu Sánchez, Kerstin Arnold, Artem Reshetnikov, and Thomas Aigner. Please give them a big applause.